Timothy Roy Boshart was a 33-year-old from Laurel, Mississippi. He loved sports and lifting weights. On September 3, 2017, a friend picked Tim up from church. They went to one house, where Tim then got a ride to another friend's home. No one seems to know what happened to Tim after that. He was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Everyone who knows me well knows I don't fit into groups very easily. In high school, despite playing team sports, I hated wearing the same uniform as everyone else. In college, I was in a housing group. It's sorta kinda like a fraternity. And for 2 years, I never wore the colors or symbols like I was expected to. Even today, I'm friendly, I'm sociable, but I never like the idea of being identified with any group. Maybe it's the reason that Unfound isn't affiliated with any podcast companies. I just don't like the idea that I would ever have to sacrifice my wants and needs and beliefs just because others expect me to due to some sort of groupthink philosophy. I'm really about as individualistic a person as you will find who lives in a metropolitan world. But I never had to go through what Tim Boshart did in his life. He found himself in jail after a series of missteps and an unfortunate addiction to painkillers. To avoid any bodily harm while serving time, he had to join a gang, the Latin Kings, giving up any sense of individualism so that he would come out of prison alive. Then a few months later, he went missing while trying to beat the drug addiction that had taken over his life. And we, the public, are left to try to figure out, if it's coincidence or not, that the people who saw Tim last were all in the gangs. And now a summary of the case. Tim Boshart was by all accounts your typical 21st century type of guy. He loved sports. He played sports. He took care of himself, becoming a gym rat, lifting weights many times a week. He went to high school, then college. Nobody could have suspected what would happen to him and how quickly it occurred. But Tim in 2011 damaged his shoulder while lifting weights. This brought on a painkiller addiction that then got Tim put in jail after he ripped a woman off for $27, although she claimed it was $500. From there, Tim spiraled into harder illegal drugs and more stints in jail. It was during one of these times that he joined the Latin Kings for protection, so that he could serve out his time alive. Yet things were looking up in August 2017. He decided to give rehab another shot by going to the Mission of the Cross in Laurel, Mississippi. Tim was hopeful that this time, by devoting himself to God and recovery, that he could turn his life around. So on September 3rd, 2017, Tim went to church with other people at the mission. Yet he didn't go home with them. Instead, Tim was picked up by a friend, Patrick, who took him to a house where drugs could be bought. From there, the story goes, Tim left Patrick behind and got a ride to another house owned by a friend of Tim's dead father, a man named Rick. After reaching there, Tim used Rick's phone, then seemingly disappeared, with Rick claiming he had no idea where Tim went. Tim was never seen again. The following items have proven to be unanswered questions in Tim's case. Number 1, why was Tim hanging around men who were not in the same gang as his own? Number 2, why has Rick never been able to reveal who Tim talked to on the day Tim disappeared? And number 3, why was Tim's birth certificate found in Rick's yard many days after Tim went missing, and it was in perfect condition, even though it had rained? The Boshart family isn't quite sure what to think at this time, although they realized Tim was struggling with many issues in early September 2017. The guest for this episode is Tim's mother, Robbie Bouchard Fairley. Unfound news. As I'm sure most of you already know, Thomas Brown's remains were found near Lake Marvin in Texas a week ago, and they were positively identified this past Tuesday. I've talked to Penny since the information came out and, of course, expressed my deepest condolences. It is now on the public record, according to Penny's private investigator, that Thomas was murdered. So thus begins the next step in the disappearance of Thomas on November 26th, 2016. Next, I was this close to sending out the January newsletter on Tuesday. Then I started getting emails from people about information forthcoming on Thomas Brown's case. So I had to hold off sending out the newsletter because I wanted to include that news in it. And since Tuesday, I've been so busy for many reasons that I never got the newsletter out. But it's coming. Within the next couple days, if not tomorrow. Finally, I'm pretty sure that the next time you hear my voice for an episode, I will be back in Florida. It will be nice to get back to the sun and sand and gators and allergy season on the Gulf Coast. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. This week I need to thank Marie, Rebecca, Maureen, Shelley, Kara, and Stephanie. You can also contribute at PayPal, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. That is also the email address. Merchandise, the books at Amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Don't forget the reviews. Shirts at myshopify.com/unfound-podcast. Cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/unfound podcast. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so fortunate to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Tim Boshart, Robbie Bouchard Fairley. Robbie, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And I'm happy you're here as well, Robbie. Let's start here, as we usually do on Unfound. Tell the listeners a little bit about your son, Tim. Maybe we can start here. What was he into as a kid? What were his hobbies, interests, education, things like that?
Okay. Tim is my oldest son. He is now 35. Tim was 33 when he became missing. Tim, as a young boy, he was a very good student all through high school. He loved sports from the time he was big enough to turn the TV on. My husband, actually my ex-husband that passed away, he used to say Tim would get up and turn golf on if that was the only sport he could watch. But he loved sports, and he could always tell you everything about any player on any team from years ago, and even made predictions about sports. So he was, very much into sports.
So he was into, you said golf. You said golf?
Well, he would watch golf if he couldn't watch anything else.
Oh, okay.
That was not his favorite, though.
Okay, that's interesting. I think that's the first time golf has ever been mentioned on Unfound. That's interesting. Maybe if he was into team sports, did he have like a favorite football team? Maybe Mississippi. Maybe was he into the Saints or maybe the Dallas Cowboys?
He loved the Saints. He actually had a Flores Elite tattoo. So,
is that right?
So, yeah,
that's neat.
He loved the Saints, and Alonzo Mourning was his favorite basketball player from years ago.
Yeah,
he had
Alonzo.
all of his cards, and he always knew all the stats about all the players. I always said that Tim, from a very young age, had a very addictive personality. Anything that he liked, he put 110 into it. He would be all in. Tim was very smart all through high school and college. He got the math award quite often when he was in high school, and he was very smart to do with computers. Whenever I remarried, my husband now had a laptop that had some issues with it, and Tim went in there and completely cleaned it up, and now that laptop works just great. So he, was very, very smart. Sometimes I think too smart. But Tim went to college for business administration, and he had a degree from Jones Junior College, and he never did get his degree from USM for the business administration, but he did not like much having it. He worked all through high school, and he worked for Ramey's grocery store, which was a local grocery store, and So he worked there through high school and college, and after college, he managed a store for Brad Ramey, and had a very good relationship with the owner, of that grocery store. He thought a lot of Tim all his years of growing up.
So he was kind of just your. So he was kind of just your. I wouldn't say average. I don't want to put it that way, but stereotypical guy into sports, working. Getting a tattoo. I guess for your kids these days, just kind of your stereotypical young man.
Right. That would have been how I would explain his growing up years for sure.
Would you say it was at that time, maybe, him going through high school and maybe into college, would you say that you and he had a pretty good relationship?
We have always been very close. From the time he was born, my first husband was in the military, so Tim and I got on an airplane when he was 1 month old to the day and flew to Hawaii. So my ex-husband was infantry, so he was gone a lot. So Tim and I spent lots and lots of time, just the two of us. So from a very young age up until now, Tim and I always were very, very, very close. One of my friends that we met while we were in the military, she made a comment one time when Tim was like 2. She said, Robbie, you always hear about how, moms are always so close to their little girls. She said that I don't think I have ever seen a mom and a little boy any closer than you and Tim. And I've always thought about that, through all of this, that he and I were always very close.
Yeah. That's really great. That's really great to hear. However, the people should know, and we're not going to go too deep into this, but you do have other children besides Tim.
Yes. I have a son. He is 30, and he is in the military. And he and Tim have always been very close growing up. Some of the decisions that Tim made, over the last few years, kind of caused him and his brother not to be as close as they had been in, past years.
Okay. I completely understand that. That happens. Not necessarily maybe as a mother the situation that you want to have, but it happens. It just happens sometimes. Yes, yeah. Okay. Did Tim have any children of his own?
He has no children.
Okay. Ever been, because he was in his 30s when he disappeared, ever been married or anything like that?
He never got married. He did have a fiance at one time. They were engaged, and they were together for a pretty good while, and then just different life things that were going on, they broke up and went their separate ways. Okay. He did have a girlfriend whenever he became missing, that he had been seeing for several months.
Okay. All right. So has went to school, it's into sports like a lot of guys are, but then what and once again, this is going to play a part in this disappearance, so we have to talk about it. Otherwise, we would not mention it. But at some point, he became addicted to painkillers, which is a very common story in the United States these days. Opioid epidemic, millions and millions of people. Not unusual. How did that happen for Tim?
Okay, Tim was working for a company out of Hattiesburg, and at that time, Tim loved to work out. He had lots of muscles. He was a very good-looking young man and had lots of muscles from working out. And he had went to work out one evening, and while working out, he tore his shoulder out. And he had to have a pretty extensive surgery on his shoulder. And whenever he had the surgery, my husband at that time, we went down and we went for the surgery. We took him home, and his girlfriend was there. And, Tim had been out on his own for years. And so, of course, we didn't stay. And, I would check on him and everything. And I never even knew, that he was getting like 90 of these a month.
Oh my.
And I didn't know that he was becoming addicted to them. And so one evening, I got a text message from Tim, and the message said, Mom, I just want you to know that after I got hurt, I became addicted to my pain pills. He said, but don't worry, I beat it. He said, I don't want to talk to you about this, so don't call me. And I was at home by myself, and I sat down on the floor and started crying because I thought he doesn't have a clue. Because I have family members that have dealt with addiction, and my son didn't know about that kind of stuff. So I thought he doesn't have a clue what he has just, what's going on.
Do you remember, if you could tell the listeners, what year do you think that was that he became addicted? When did this all happen? If he disappeared in 2017, what year do you think that was?
I'm thinking that was probably, he had the surgery in 2011, if I figured it up right.
Okay.
So this would have probably been around 2011.
Okay. But at some point he let you know that he was addicted to him, but he says at that point that he had beat it.
Right.
And
That's
do you think
what he had told me? He beat it.
Okay. And do you think that was also in 2011, or could possibly have that been in 2012? Let's say.
It could have been 2012. It was somewhere in that time frame, though.
Okay. But it sounds to me, though, the way you're portraying is that when you heard this message, you were a little doubtful of this because of your own, maybe not your own personal experience, but other people that you knew that had become addicted like that. Were you a little leery of what he said?
That is correct. In the back of my mind, I was sitting here thinking, oh no, this is not going to be good. But as moms, we try to, put the icing on the cake and think, oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But, here we are today. So no, Mom's instincts were right on target.
Okay. Yeah. Addiction comes up a lot in the cases that I cover. So I'm used to hearing this, unfortunately. So he tells you that, but did you ever end up having a one-on-one conversation with him about this? Sometime after that?
Well, not really right at that time. The first episode that Tim had would get into trouble with the law happened probably about 6 months after that occurred. And then that's when the roller coaster of him would be doing good and bad, rehabs, and it's just a cycle. It's a cycle with addiction.
And you had told me that he had maybe moved on from painkillers to illegal drugs too, at some point.
That's what he had told me about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before he became missing. He had confided in me and told me that.
Okay.
And I think the reason for that, from my research that I've done, is it's getting harder for the people who are addicted to those, to like the pills. It's getting harder for them to get them, and that's good, but they're going to even worse things,
Right, of course. You had already mentioned that he started having some problems with the law. Once again, you said like 6 months after this injury and him starting to take the painkillers. So I'm guessing that, that those two things may be related to each other. What was the first incident that happened that you found out about where he had a run-in with the law?
The first time he was pulled over in Sumrall, and it just so happened that a family member of mine was the police officer that pulled him over. And he said that Tim was weaving, on the road. And then whenever he pulled him over, there was things found, paraphernalia was found in the vehicle. And, of course, Tim was put in jail. So, and at that time, it was still new to us. So what did Mom do? She ran down and got him out immediately. My baby can't be in jail.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing that I did there in the beginning. If he got in trouble immediately, no matter what, somehow I was getting him out. So, but as we'll get into the conversation later about later on.
So what was the charge then in that case? What was he charged with?
I read maybe it was reckless driving and
Mm,
paraphernalia in the car.
okay.
And he couldn't pass the sobriety test.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly the hopping or whatever they do.
So you bailed him out. Did he serve any time, or did you just have to pay a fine? What was the result of that,
Um, I
if you can remember?
he was. I don't really remember a lot of details because there's been so many things that's happened since
Yeah.
then. But I know he did go to jail, and then we had to get a bail bonds person to get to pay the bond to get him out. So he
Mm,
probably had to stay there, I would imagine, overnight. But we got him out, I'm sure, the next day.
okay. But you're not thinking he spent any long-term time in that at that point. I'm going to guess 2012 sometime. Not a lot of
At that
time.
time, no,
Okay.
no, sir. That at that time, no, he did not.
Okay. In talking to you, Robbie, I think the first incident that maybe put him on the track to the point that he's now missing. You told me then about an incident at a gas station that happened. What year did that happen, and what were the facts of that? What happened?
Um, the gas station accident, I am pretty sure happened in 2014.
Okay.
Um, this was a story that I was told by Tim. Of course, he was messing up, and he
Hmm.
was on whatever pills or whatever, and he went to this gas station, and a lady came out of the gas station, and Tim went up to her, and somehow during their conversation, he snatched an envelope from her hand,
Hmm.
and he ran off with it. And then one day, the police show up at our house and arrest him. Well, originally, um, this is what I was told by Tim's bail bondsman, that the lady had said there was $27 in the envelope. So, that means it's a misdemeanor. And so Tim was, we got him out of jail. And then a few months later, maybe not even a few months, I don't remember the exact time frame, but the police show up at our house again, and Tim is arrested and taken back to jail. I called his bail bondsman, and he said the lady had changed it, that instead of it being $27, that it was $500, which made it a felony. And so it was quite a bit of money I had to come up with to get him out, but I did. Once again, I got him out, and he and I were talking, and that changed the whole deal, from being the misdemeanor to the felony.
Yeah.
And he was very angry at this lady. And I said, Tim, I said, you did wrong. I said, whether it was $27 or $500, you did wrong. I said, so you have to be punished for it. He said, yeah, Mama, but it makes a big difference. And at that time, I didn't know what kind of difference it was going to make, but it did. It made a big difference. It meant that Tim ended up going to prison because of that felony.
Mm-hmm.
And he spent 9 months in
Wow.
prison at Parchman because of that. And so it
Mm-hmm.
that time that he was at Parchman, I would say was it could, things that happened while he was there could possibly be why I'm right here where we are
Right.
today, because of
Right. And that's why we're
things
talking
that
about it.
happened.
That's exactly
Yes,
right.
sir.
And the listeners are going to hear that. That's exactly why we're talking about it. Did he ever give you any reason why he snatched that envelope from that woman? I mean, just between us and the listeners, did he admit doing that? And did he do it for drug reasons?
He did. He admitted doing it. Tim's always a very honest person and
Mm-hmm.
always very accountable for his actions. One of the police officers one time had told me he was one of the most well-mannered young men that he had ever dealt with. And I said, well, that's how he was raised. So even whenever he was messing up or had done wrong, he was very much respectful, and he was very much accountable for his actions of what he had done. So yes, sir, he did tell me that he did it, but he was
Okay.
very angry at the fact that it was only $27, and I don't say that lightly. Only $27.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was angry that he ended up getting a felony charge against him when that was not true.
Okay. Okay. Now there is also, and we will talk about what went on in jail in a second, but I think that to make this most easily understandable is that then after that, so he was in for 9 months, he gets out, but then he then at some point has another incident with a truck that he was driving for his boss. So I'm guessing over this time he was still holding down a job, at least while he wasn't in jail.
Yes, sir. He after he got out of jail, he started working with a landscaping company.
Okay.
And there's some. Last night when I was trying to remember a lot of things, for our conversation today, I had also remembered that after he came out of prison, you would think 9 months in prison that would be enough to straighten, get somebody on the right track. Well, he started messing up again, and so he ended up going back into the work program. He personally went down to his parole officer and asked them to put him in the 6-month work program at Lamar County. So he went in there probably in like May of 2014, and then he stayed there until like November, I believe it was. He got out not too long. It was maybe around Thanksgiving or Christmas that year. So he went in there for the 6 months and stayed through the work program. And so, he sent me messages during that time, even told me that while he was on the work program, that one of the guys that he worked with, had took him to church, and he made a phone call to me and said, "Mama, I just wanted to know that I got saved." And I was like, "Well, that is wonderful news, Tim," and so he stays through the work program, and then he gets out. And then in January, his dad passed away. And that was a very, very, very hard thing for Tim.
Yeah.
And after his dad passed away, he had told me he just needed to get away from here. So he went to Utah and went to a truck driving school. And he was going to school at the truck driving school, and then he started driving a truck over the road. So then after he was driving over the road for several months, he ended up coming home, and that would have probably been like in July maybe of 2016. Okay.
Yes.
All this stuff happened so close together when I started looking at the time frame last night. And so he was home, and that was a time where Tim seemed very stressed for some reason. And I know that he was having a hard time because of his dad passing away, but it seemed like there was more to it than that. And he and I were here by ourselves, and I said, "Tim," I said, "what is wrong, honey?" I said, "You seem so stressed out. You shouldn't be feeling this way." I said, "There's no pressure on you." And he said, "There's just things I can't talk to you about, Mom." And I said, "Tim," I said, "I'm fixing to ask you something." And I said, "Before your dad passed away," I said, "he told me that while you were in prison, that you had to join a gang, and that you were going to have to pay that gang for the rest of your life." I said, "Is that what the pressure is that's on you?" And he got so angry. I mean, his face turned blood red. And he turned around and he looked at me and he said, "Mom, I am so angry at Dad right now." He said, "If he was here, it would not be good." He said, "I will never talk to you about anything to do with the gang."
And let's just say what the gang was. What gang? I guess it was his father who passed away that told you this, and so I'm guessing that's how you found out the name of the gang. What is the name of the gang?
It was the Latin Kings, is what I was told.
Okay. And are we to understand that he got into this gang while he was in jail for the gas station incident?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. So while he was in there, he got involved in the gang. What is your understanding as to why he did this? What did his father tell you?
Well, actually, Tim had told me when he was in prison, he had told me one day, he said, "Mom, He said, I think I'm going to have to join a gang. And I said, no. And he said, Mom, you cannot put enough money on my books for me to get the protection that I need while I'm in here.
What does that mean on my book? What, enough money on my book? What does that mean to the layman?
Okay, so when someone's in prison, they have a thing where you can put money, and they call it on their books. It's like in an account for them to get food or hygiene, things like that they need while they're in prison.
Okay.
And I tried to put $50 a week on Tim's books. And sometimes I would put more if there was something extra he needed, but at least $50 a week I put on there for him to get, extra food, coffee, hygiene things, toothbrush, toothpaste, things like that I guess is not necessarily provided for them there through the prison system.
Okay.
And so that was just what he had told me that, and then he never talked to me ever about it again after that. He never told me he did or didn't. It was never discussed. The only other incident that I knew about was he had told his dad that there would be an envelope coming in the mail. And it did. There was an envelope that came in the mail, and it was addressed from Tim to Tim. And he had told his dad when it came in that we were to put that envelope in his room and we were not to open it.
Okay.
Now,
and we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. I just want to make sure we focus on. So he got into this gang, and then when he was out, you brought it up to him, and he didn't want to talk about it. Okay.
That's correct.
Just did not want to talk about it. And then at one point, did he go back into jail for allegedly stealing his boss's truck?
That would have been in August of 2016.
Okay, so this would have been after you had already confronted him about this gang affiliation.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And if you could, just for the listeners, please explain just a little bit how he ended up back in jail.
Well, he got a job driving what they call hot shots. It's like real quick little runs, maybe from like somewhere in Alabama to somewhere in Florida and then back. And he was doing those runs for a guy out of Alabama. And the guy had called me and said he couldn't get a hold of him. And so I started trying to get a hold of him, and I couldn't get a hold of him either. And the guy sent me a message and told me if he does not contact me, he said, I'm fixing to put a missing thing out on my vehicle. And so I'm sending him messages, you better call your boss. And he did it. And so the guy did. He put the missing thing out on the vehicle. And so Tim was actually in Lucedale, which is like 30 minutes from my house. So I don't know if he was trying to come here and then tell the guy, the truck was here or what. But anyway, he got pulled over, and he was I actually talked to the police officer, and he told me that Tim was very messed up whenever he got pulled over and that there was paraphernalia in the truck. So he went to jail in Lucedale for 90 days. And Tim called me on the phone, and when like 2 days after he was in there, and he was like, "Okay, Mom, it won't cost, but like I don't even remember, like $100. It was real cheap to get him out." And I said, "No." I said, "I am not paying nothing to get you out." I said, "You are going to sit there for the 90 days or however long they keep you." I said, "You are staying there." And he was like angry at me and said some things, and we got off the phone. And then the next day, he started trying to call me, and I wouldn't put any money on the phone because that's another thing. Whenever they're in jail or prison or whatever, you put money on a phone thing where they can call you. And I wouldn't do it because he had acted so ugly on the phone. I would not put any money on there for him to be able to call me. And he called and he called and he called. And so finally I thought, oh my gosh, let me just do it. So I put some money on there. And he called me, and this was just Tim's personality. He was like, "Mom," he said, "I was going to keep calling every 5 minutes until you put some money on that phone so I could call you. He said, because I had to call you and tell you how sorry I am.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right. Take your time.
For how he had acted and for the things he had said.
Yeah.
But so that was just a matter of the drugs getting out of his system, because Tim on drugs and my Tim are two totally different people.
Of course. Of course. And by
So
this
he
time,
stayed in there.
by the second time that he ended up in jail, he was past the painkillers. And do you believe that he was into heroin, into meth, something like that?
Whenever he was in Lucille, this one,
Yes.
probably yes, because they said they found stuff in the truck that would insinuate that. So
Okay. And I just have to ask you, being that you did bring up this gang affiliation, the Latin Kings, that one time when he was out of jail, did the topic
right.
of him being in a gang ever come up again? Did it come up when he was in jail the next time? Anything until he disappeared?
Nothing
Between you
came
and him?
out. Has it come up between? No, not between he and I. No.
That was the only conversation you. Oh, okay. So when he told you that time to never bring it up again, I guess you just kind of went along with that.
I did.
Okay.
Did, because I could tell he was not going to talk to me about it. Whatever it was, he was not going to talk to me about it.
Of course. Okay. And just to be clear,
of me, so.
and just to be clear, in that time that he was out of jail, where he became a member of their gang, did any what you would believe gang members? Did you ever see him around any gang members? Did they ever come over to the house? Anything like that while he was out of jail?
No, nobody ever came to our house. So if he saw anybody like that, I didn't know about it.
Okay. All right. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, we're going to come back to that later. But we need to move on to this. Tim did try to get clean by going and staying at a mission nearby where he lived. Why don't you tell the listeners about that? Were you surprised? Had you even known about this place before Tim went there? What can you tell the listeners about it and what happened while he was there?
Okay, well, while Tim was in jail in Lucille, he sent me a message. It was a little bit different way of me and him communicating at that time. Instead of me putting money in for the phone, you could do emails, and you could do emails, a lot of emails, and it was a lot cheaper than doing the phone. So that's what we did. We did the email thing. And he would email me just all of the time, and he had told me that he had asked the chaplain for a Bible while he was in there, and that the chaplain had brought him, a Bible, and had also brought him some material on the group called the Hellfighters. And he said that they had a mission in Laurel, which is only like 30 minutes from our house.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was called Mission at the Cross. And he said, Mom, I want you to check into this for me. He said, but don't sign me up. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to sign you up. And I said, but I'll do some checking into it for you. So I started checking into it for him and sending him the information about it. And so he made the decision himself that whenever he got out of jail, that he wanted to go there. So the day that he got out of jail, and I remember the exact day, it was November 13th, because it's my other son's birthday. I picked him up from jail, and we went straight to the mission.
And this is, just to be clear, this is of 2016.
Yes,
Okay.
That would be 2016. Yes.
Okay.
So we went to the mission, and he stayed that day. That day he started his 6-month stay there at the Mission at the Cross in Laurel, and it was such a good program for him. He did so well. I was so proud of him, and I go back and look. I always say God gives you gifts, and I say that 6 months that he was at that mission was the best 6 months I had with my son in years. It was Tim, my son Tim, and he he done so well. He after he was there just a few months, he was like the third in charge there. So he sat in like on the interviews when new people would come,
Wow.
that were wanting to get into the mission. So
And just to be clear, this is a place where he would stay. He would stay there. He would sleep there. He would eat there, and they would put him to work, doing work.
yes, it's a work-based program, and it's very, very spiritually based. I mean, they have Bible study, lots of Bible study. They go to church. They go speak at churches. So it's a very, very, godly based rehab place.
Okay, so I guess it's not your usual detox center then. There aren't like doctors or psychiatrists or anything like that there. It's something a little different than that.
That is correct. It's Jesus-based, so there's no detox. So if someone were to go there and need to be detoxed, they should go get that done before they go there.
Okay. And did you go visit him there? Were you allowed to just go over there anytime you wanted and visit him there? Or?
Well, for the first several weeks, there was no communication. And then after that, he could call, I think, on Sunday, and we could go visit on Sunday. So we went pretty much every Sunday to see him. And then Thanksgiving, came in November that year. So I went and spent, that afternoon with him on Thanksgiving. So, but we went and seen him every Sunday.
And he was doing good. And he was doing good.
He was doing very good.
Okay. And once again, this is some I guess it's like a non-profit organization. It was started Health Fighters International. Started by a guy with a couple dollars. He had, and I've looked him up. He had issues in his life. He wanted to give back, and so he started this mission to help people.
Correct.
This Mr. Hedrick, that you've met, that we were going to talk about, that we will talk about in a little bit. Okay. All right. So he's at the mission. Seems like things are going well, but no talk of any gang affiliation or anything like that. But then I think this was in 2017. He dropped out 3 days before he would have got some sort of certificate or something. Please explain that.
Well, I don't really know exactly why Tim left. He did leave just a few days before he would have gotten his certificate. And I wanted him to finish, and I was trying to encourage him to do that. And there was just some, like I said, he was the third in charge, and Tim was very private. He didn't always talk to me about everything. So I don't know exactly what was going on. He wasn't liking something to do with how things were being done. There was sometimes when the people, they would make them leave, and I guess, he probably voiced his opinion, and the person that's over it voiced his opinion, and maybe they didn't see eye to eye, and Tim ended up leaving. And then Tim ended up meeting with Mr. Hedrick and Mike Shirley, and then Tim was going to go back. And then he went back, and then he called my husband that afternoon and said, come get me. And my husband ended up going and getting him. So we really don't know exactly what it was. Tim's not a person to talk about anything negative about people. That was not his personality. So whatever their disagreement was, he kept it between himself and them. And he left. So
okay. And what did he do once he got out?
Well, once he got out, he was, of course, staying here with us, and he got a job in Hattiesburg at a glass company. I helped him get a vehicle, and he was going back and forth to work and seemed to be doing pretty good. He mentioned to me one time that there was some boy that had been in jail with him that had contacted him through Facebook And I was not happy about it because I didn't know the guy. But he said, you know who that is, Mom? He said, you sent him a card when we were in jail, and he said he still has that card you sent him. And so, of course, I said, well, that's good. I'm glad that he still has the card because Tim had told me some guy that didn't ever get mail, and I had sent him a card. But I still didn't want Tim around him, because anybody that knows people that have struggled with addiction or drugs or whatever, you got to stay completely away from those people. And if you get back in with those old friends, most of the time you're going to go down bad roads again.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Tim started going down bad roads again. And
While he was living with you. While he was living
Yes.
with you, he kind of got into the bad habits again.
Exactly. Yes, sir. And I hate that but as a parent or someone who has dealt with it, you want to think it's not real. You want to say, oh, no, it's not happening, but it's happening. You know the signs. And he had started seeing the other girl here in town where we live, and I kept hoping that maybe that would turn into something good, and maybe that would be something that would give him reason to want to not, keep going around the bad stuff, but apparently it didn't,
Okay. Now, something that, and by the time the listeners hear us talking, I will have posted this picture so they can judge it for themselves, but during the time that after he got out of, he left the mission and before he disappeared, I think you had to get together a party, something at your house, and a picture was taken of him. And it wasn't maybe until later that somebody said, "Is that a gun in Tim's pocket?" Maybe you can explain, maybe explain what that party was and how that picture happened.
Yes, sir. Actually, that was just a few days after Tim had come home. It was my stepdaughter's birthday, and she was also graduating from high school. And we had a big family get together and crawfish boil and lots of family and friends here. And Tim, the picture that I have that I get sent to you, he's smiling in the picture. He's happy, and I would have never dreamed that anything was wrong, and then after he became missing, a friend of mine that helps me a lot, she has friends that are police officers, and some of them are retired. And one particular police officer was looking and spotted that picture and told her about it. And whenever she showed it to me, she said, "Why would Tim have a gun in his pocket?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "That was at a family get-together." I said, "I don't have a clue as to why he would have had a gun in his pocket." So,
yes, and we have to remember that he was a convicted felon, and it would not be legal for him to have a gun.
Correct.
Yeah, that would be a big deal. That'd be big trouble.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay, so
we have to. That's a piece of this puzzle that we don't know.
Right. And the people, the listeners will have seen the picture by now, and they can make a judgment for themselves whether they think that is a gun or not. But it certainly did catch somebody's attention after Tim disappeared, on top of the fact that since he was a convicted felon, he was not supposed to have a gun on him. And then you look at the circumstances, he's at a party, what is exactly going on there? But, I guess the good news, at least at the time, was that he turned around. Then in August of 2017, he went back into the mission.
That is correct.
Okay. And I don't know much about this mission, but I'm surprised that they would take somebody back who had dropped out before.
Yes, sir. They do, though. I know there's been, I am, friends on Facebook with their page, and I watch, and read, about the different young men that come and go there. As a matter of fact, I have several of my friends that their sons over the last few months have gone there, that I, had referred to go there, that were having problems. But they do. I mean, they're a very, good organization, and they, they loved him. And they, Tim told me he had talked to Mike, and that, that they had talked about, whatever their differences were when Tim had left, and and everything was going to be good. That he was going to go back, and he made it quite clear. When I was telling him he needed to stick with it, and I was putting some things out there that he needed to do. That it was his decision that he was going. For me to quit putting conditions on it. So this was the night before he had left. So he was going on his own. It was his decision to go there. It's not somewhere that you can be forced to go to. They don't take you. You sit in on an interview where they make sure that you're ready, for a life change. Whenever you come there, you're ready to, to put Jesus first, and and depend on the Lord to help you through with the addiction.
Yeah. Okay, so he was allowed to go back in there, and you, of course, had to be happy about that. Maybe this young woman who is in Tim's life was happy about that. People who care about Tim were happy about that, and I'm guessing things you thought were back on track. And I bet August 2017 should have been a good month.
Right. That was on August 30th. Yes, sir. That's what we were thinking, that he was fixing to, he'd seen that going back down those bad roads, what it had led to, and he was ready to, Tim was 33. It was, I kept telling him, Tim, I'm not always going to be here to pick up the pieces. You've got to get this under control.
Right. Right. Now you had mentioned that he had befriended a guy while he was in jail that he should have probably been staying away from, but he wasn't. Is this the guy Patrick?
No, sir, it's
Okay.
not.
Okay. Well, before we get into actual September 3rd, 2017, let's talk a little bit about Patrick, because he's going to be mentioned prominently from now on. Why don't you just explain a little bit about who he is? And in fact, you had known and Tim had known Patrick for a long time, since they were kids. Is that right?
That is correct. Which we didn't know that in the very beginning. Actually, the day that I took Tim to the mission, that November 13th, Patrick's mom was there with him, and we didn't even know the connection at that time. So they ended up going to the mission on the exact same day.
The first time. The first time.
The first time, yes,
Okay.
the first time.
Okay.
And we were there one Sunday visiting with Tim, and his Patrick's sisters had been in my youth group at church for years, whenever they were all younger. And I knew his mom and his dad. I delivered their newspaper for years. And so we were sitting there talking, and I heard the mom and the son going out the door, and I heard her voice. And I looked at Tim, and I touched him on the leg, and I said, Tim, what was that young man's name? And he told me, and I was like, what's his last name? And he told me, and I was like, and I started patting, I was like, we know them. I said, you remember from church, and I was explaining to him, who they were. And so whenever when Patrick came back in, he's like, hey man, my mom knows your mom, and then the next Sunday when we were all there, of course, we all talked and everything. And now his mom and I still talk, now we still keep in contact. So yeah, that was a connection that we did not even know at,
Okay.
then, but now we do. So.
Okay, so Patrick was at the mission with Tim, at least the first time. And did Patrick, after that, kind of pop up once in a while? And in fact, when Tim left the mission the first time, did Patrick ever come over to your house since Tim was staying there? How well did you get to know Patrick again, being that he was now an adult?
I know that he and Tim, talked, but I don't think he ever came here to the house.
Okay.
We did all go bowling one night, though, probably about maybe a month before Tim became missing. It was me and my husband, and Tim and his girlfriend, and Patrick and another girl, and then a couple of men from the mission that were like contractors there that Tim had got really close to. Patrick worked for one of the electricians. They were there, and
Okay.
and of course they had all come to love Tim and Patrick, so
Okay.
they were there, we all bowled and everything.
Okay, now
But
here's a
that was the only
very...
time that
Please.
that was the only time that I had been around Patrick. So
Okay. Now I need to ask you an important question here. Did you know at the time, before Tim disappeared, that Patrick was also affiliated with a gang?
I did not.
Okay.
I actually found that out after Tim was missing.
Okay. And we will talk more in depth on that, but the listeners need to understand the reason this is significant is because Tim was in a gang, Patrick was in a gang, but they were not in the same gang. And in fact, the two gangs that Tim and Patrick were in, respectively, are rivals, enemies, however you want to put it. And so I want the listeners to keep that in mind as we continue. Okay. Let's move on here. And the name of that gang would be the Simon City Royals that Patrick was in?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, let's move on to September 3rd. I realize that you didn't know this at the time that it was happening, but what have you learned about the day that that Tim disappeared?
Okay. Well, the day that Tim disappeared, the thing with the mission is they went to church at Highland Baptist Church in Laurel. And Tim had went to church there that morning. And Patrick was there at church that morning also. But which that's not unusual because quite a few of the people who have been through the mission will go back and visit there, and some of them even, I think, attend there regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about, I guess it was probably around 3 o'clock that afternoon, Mr. Vaughn, who we had met through the mission, he had come, him and his wife, Miss T, had come to just love Tim. Tim had spent a lot of time with them. And Mr. Vaughn called and said that Mike Shirley had called him and said that Tim did not come back with the group from church that morning. Now, we were all a little concerned that they waited 3 hours, plus or minus, to let anyone know that Tim had left the mission.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately, Mr. Vaughn and his wife, they live up there close by. They live in Petal. They got out and started driving toward the mission and up and down 59, thinking that maybe Tim had left walking. Well, Mr. Vaughn ended up being told by someone that they had seen Tim talking to Patrick out in the parking lot. Well, I started contacting Patrick, trying to find out if he had possibly given Tim a ride. And I go back to the beginning. All the people that originally supposedly seen Tim that day, they did not tell me the truth. I was told no, they did not. He did not give Tim a ride. He, didn't see Tim.
Okay.
Well, we end up finding out, a little bit later, like maybe the next day. I think I looked back at my messages, and it was like late the next day. He finally tells me in a message that
Patrick tells you. Patrick tells you, or who tells you?
Patrick tells me in a message that he did give Tim a ride. And do you want me to keep it going on?
Please. Okay, so he finally admits the day after, so that would be September 4th, that yes, he did see Tim in the parking lot at this church, and yes, he did give Tim a ride. Where did he allegedly take Tim?
Okay, he told me he took Tim to an apartment over off of 589, which you would get on 589 going toward Purvis. And after me digging around, I didn't find out all this stuff immediately. I mean, it took sometimes days for me to find out everything. But
yes,
I ended up finding out that he had dropped Tim off at a guy that Tim knew really well, named Karanja Kabir. And he goes by KC.
All right. And the initials K period, C period.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Had
At
you
that
ever
point.
heard of this guy before, ever?
I had heard Tim mention KC, but
Mm-hmm.
Tim did not talk to me about anybody hardly in that world.
Okay.
He might mention a name like, well, he was like, one time he told me, I'm going to spend the night with KC. And I was like, well, who is KC? And he said, he's just a friend of mine. And I'm like, well, what does he do? And he's like, Mama, he's cool. It's all right, So he was not going to give me any information. But
Okay.
so
Okay. So you found
anyway,
out that he went to this guy, KC's, and he seems to have a very unusual name there. Um, and so he dropped him off. So Patrick owned up to the fact that he took him over to KC's. And what did Patrick say? He just left him there? Was Patrick supposed to come back? What did Patrick say about that?
he said that Tim had told him that his girl, which would have been his girlfriend, was going to pick him up when she got off from work.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Patrick told me.
Okay.
And later on, as the time progressed, I got to thinking about Tim's Bible, and I was like, well, Tim would have had his Bible with him. Where is his Bible? So I asked Patrick, Patrick, where is Tim's Bible? And he said, oh, Miss Robbie, he told me to take care of it for him. So in my mind, I'll just be blunt, I thought, why would Tim, if his girlfriend was picking him up in a few hours, tell Patrick to take care of his Bible
Mm-hmm.
for him?
Yeah. Okay. So who is this? I just have to be outright with this. Is KC also in a gang?
I've been told he is.
All right. And is he in Tim's gang or was he in Patrick's gang?
He's in a different gang. I
You,
think the Black Disciple is the name of the one
all right.
that KC is in.
Okay. So he's in a totally different one. Did you ever have a chance, being that you did this, did the police or you, and we'll talk about the police here in a moment, what does KC say happened when Tim was dropped off? Does he even say that happened?
He did. I actually went and talked to him, and he told me that when he first I knocked on the door, and a girl came to the door, and I said, "Does Karanja Kabert live here?" And at first she was like, not going to, tell me. And I said, look, I said, I am Tim Bouchart's mother. I said, is KC here? And about that time he came to the door, and he came out and he just hugged me, and he said, you're Tim's mom? And I said, yes. And he took his fist and he beat it on his heart, and he said, Tim is a good person, and Tim has a good heart, and he said, that he was starting to get worried too. He said, because he said I feel like Tim would have contacted me by now. This was probably about 2 weeks after Tim was missing.
Okay, but
And
what does Casey say happened? Did he own up to Tim being there on September 3rd?
he does. He says Tim was there,
Mm-hmm.
and he says that two guys named T.C. Chambliss and W.L. Johnson came to his house, and that he gave them some money to supposedly take Tim wherever Tim wanted to go. And then they say, I've talked to them also. I've talked to T.C. Chambliss. I never have talked to W.L. Johnson.
Okay,
He won't talk
great,
to me.
great.
I talked to T.C., and he told me that they gave Tim a ride over to Rick Llewellyn, which is probably maybe just a couple of miles from KC's.
All right, and what did Rick say? We're just going to go step by step here. That's great. It's easy for the listeners to understand. So you went, and we have to understand that you did this, like you said, weeks after all of this. What does Rick Llewellyn say?
Okay, and so I went to Rick's house, and Rick told me that Tim was there that day, even though I had talked to Rick on the phone that day, and he told me he was not there. But now he tells me Tim was there that day, because I had called Rick and, was kind of, I'm not going to say what I said to him, but
okay.
Anyway, I had told him I better not help him get any drugs. That was my words to him. And And he did say to me that I better not threaten him. So anyway, Tim was there. He said Tim was there at his house, and that Tim was supposedly out by some bushes on Rick's phone, he said, for a long, long time. And so the girlfriend supposedly got Rick to pull the records, and the only phone call that she said it showed up was Tim calling his credit card and calling one other boy. And that's all been turned into the police, too.
Okay. So, Rick, I guess we just need to get right to this. Does Rick say that then Tim left from his house, that somebody else picked him up? I mean, what does Rick say?
Rick says he doesn't know if Tim left walking or if someone picked him up. And we don't have another account of my son since that day for sure.
So Tim was at Rick's place, but then Rick can't even tell you how Tim left.
That's what he says.
Okay. Well, I have to compliment you, Robbie. That's some very good investigation, especially since I know that most, if not all, of these people are shady characters. Okay. And maybe I should need to ask you that right now. These guys who took Tim over to Rick's, are they in a gang?
I don't know. They're old. So
okay.
I really don't know.
Okay. Is Rick Llewellyn in a gang?
I have been told that Rick was in a gang, but I don't know. I mean, he's old too. So, I don't know about that for sure.
Okay. So when you say old, Tim is 33 and they are 50, 60?
They would be in their 50s or maybe even a little older because I'm 55. So.
Okay. All right. So these guys are quite a bit older than Tim is. But people are driving Tim around, and it seems that Casey told you the truth, that, and then Rick is owning up that Tim was there, but then the path from there gets kind of just disappears, it seems. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. And would you say that Casey and Rick and these other guys, they are involved in, or do they do drugs themselves? Do they traffic in drugs? Have they been in and out of jail just like Tim was?
Well, I know Casey's in jail now.
He is.
And, you can look up what it is. It's to do with drugs.
Okay.
Drug trafficking, I believe is what it says.
Okay. And just to be clear, from Rick's, there is no proof that Tim went anywhere else. He might have walked. Somebody might have picked him up, or maybe something could have happened to him at Rick's. We just don't know.
That's exactly right.
Okay. And just to once again put this in the timeline, how long after Tim disappeared on September 3rd, 2017, that you were able to track these people down, see them in person, and actually talk to them? How many weeks after would you say?
It was probably about 2 weeks. But some of them I had talked to over the phone, but face to face, it was probably about 2 weeks after Kim was missing. I went to them. I actually have a friend that's a retired police officer. He went with me, and we recorded statements from every one of these people, except for W.L. Johnson. He would not. He ran off in his car as soon as we pulled into the driveway, so we didn't.
He ran off. Ran off in his car.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because KC called him and told him we were coming because we were trying to find him. We didn't know where these people live, but KC told us where they live. And so KC called him on the phone and says, I don't know why he said the police are coming to talk to you, but it wasn't the police. It was me and a private investigator. But he jumped in his car and ran off and wouldn't talk to us. But everybody else talked to us.
And you haven't been able to talk to him since in the last, let's say, year and a half?
I have not. I've never went to him. People have told me not to go over there by myself. So.
Of course. Okay. All right. So you found out Tim was missing on the very day that he went missing from people at the mission. And some of those people, I'll just name them: Vaughn Blackwell, Mike Shirley, are a couple of the guys that work at this mission in Laurel, Mississippi. And that's kind of what put you on to calling all of these people. When did you exactly file a missing persons report to the police?
I filed it that Monday morning, I called.
Well, you're gonna
That
have to
Monday
give us a
morning.
date. You'll.
Okay,
So,
that was in September 4th. I'm sorry.
September
So he
4th.
came
Thank you.
in on September 3rd and September 4th.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the next day.
Yes, sir.
Next day, okay. Did they do much? Did they seem to care? What was your impression?
Well, Tim got assigned an investigator for his case, and I contacted him, and I gave him all the information that I had, and from what he's told me, he has went multiple times and talked to these people. The only one that I know that I have heard that he has never talked to Patrick, and I've never understood that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, I just have to trust them. As a matter of fact, we had got some information one time, and the sheriff called me on the phone and told me, Miss Fairley, he said, you just have to trust us and let us do our job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do. I do trust them, and I do let them do their jobs, but also I get lots of information. People call me and text me and message me all kinds of information. And I promise you, there is not a single information that I've been given that me and my friends have not, as much as we could, investigated.
Yeah, I believe it. Since you went and found these guys roughly 2 weeks after Tim disappeared, did the police also find out on their own the sequence of events, once again, from going to the mission to the church, Patrick taking him to Casey's, and then these other guys taking Tim to Rick Llewellyn's? Did the police also find that out, or did they have to rely on you to tell them that?
Well, I had already told them all of it, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. They don't tell me anything that people
Mm-hmm.
tell them. Even
Right.
when I've turned in leads to them, when I've called one time to ask about what they found out about what I had told them, I was told, Miss Fairley, we cannot tell you anything about our investigation. Well, I have to respect that.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is, these guys, when you went to see them 2 weeks later, was it your impression that the police had talked to them yet? Did they ever say, well, the cops were over here the other day? Did any of them ever say anything like that?
They did. Actually,
They did.
Casey and Rick have both said that the police have been to their house multiple times. As a
Okay.
matter of fact, they wanted to do everything they could to help find Tim so that the police would leave them alone. That's what they said.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
But they never talked to Patrick. They have never talked to Patrick as far as I know.
Okay. All right. So, just don't know what necessarily to make of this. Could be something suspicious, something illegal. We just don't know. But we do, and of course, this case is still unsolved as of our talking on January 16th, 2019. Just not a lot of answers as to what happened after Tim was at Rick Llewellyn's. So let's talk about a few other things. Being that Tim had a girlfriend at the time, we're not going to use her name. Did you have a chance to talk to her, and what did she have to say about all of this?
Yes, sir. I have talked to her multiple times. I actually called her the day that we got the phone call saying that Tim had left the mission, and she was at work. And she was very upset that Tim had left the mission, and she's not here now. She works somewhere out of the country, but up until she left, she had spent a lot of time, helping me and going and on leads that she was given and talking to people. So I feel that she has helped as much as she could to try to find him.
Okay. Has she ever offered up? I mean, then I guess that she did not know that Tim was planning to go to Casey's and over to Rick's. When you found out about it, when you told her, was she surprised to find out about all of this or not?
I think, she probably figured that would have been the area that Tim would have gone to, because, she was more in on Tim's life as far as hanging around with those people than I was. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
I got all their phone numbers from her, so
Mm-hmm.
she wasn't surprised that was who the people that Tim, went to whenever he left the mission.
Okay.
But I
So
think she was
once
surprised that
again,
he didn't contact her.
she was not aware that Tim had any plans to get picked up by Patrick, go to Casey's, and then go to Rick. She was not aware of any of that.
That's what she told me. She knew nothing about that.
Okay.
But she did tell me that Tim had called her like almost every night, asking her, actually begging her to come get him, and she kept telling him no, that he needed to stay. He needed to stay, and she said that he had promised her that he would stay.
Mm-hmm. Was that news to you when she told you that? Was that news to you, that even though he was back in the mission, he had not been in the mission that long, that he was already looking to get out again?
She never told me. She knows that I was upset with her about that she didn't tell me that he called her asking her to come get him. If I had known that, I could have got Mr. Vaughn, who Tim loved dearly. We could have maybe went over there and gave him some encouragement or something, but I didn't know.
Okay.
I thought everything was good, that he was good. You don't get to talk to him.
Did Tim's girlfriend infer from him wanting to get out that he wanted to go out and get drugs?
I'm sorry?
When he would tell her that he wanted to get out of the mission to his girlfriend, did that mean that he wanted to get out and maybe go get drugs, something like that?
I believe so. I believe that's what she thought.
Okay. All right. You just mentioned, we may come back to her maybe in this conversation or not. I'm not sure. But Vaughn Blackwell, he worked at the mission, and though he quit the mission, he works with you now. He's been working with you on Tim's case?
He does help me with it, yes.
Okay.
He and his wife have become like family to us, helping try to find Tim.
Okay.
But he didn't actually work directly for the mission. He worked with Mr. Hedrick, but he had communication with people at the mission.
Okay. And what has he said, if anything, if you can say, about those final days of Tim being at the mission before he disappeared? Obviously, we know that Tim wanted to get out of there. Did Vaughn know that? Is Vaughn surprised by that? What have the conversations been with you and Vaughn, being that Vaughn is knew Tim and then knows what goes on at the mission?
Yes, sir. He actually did go by and see Tim, I think, when Tim first got there. And he had told me that Tim, not at that time, but after all this has happened, he had said that Tim was having, it was tough. He was having a hard time, and my thinking on that is he was the withdrawals, because I didn't think that Tim was back using a few days before he had went to the mission, because he had went into Pine Grove for like a week. So I was thinking his detox time, and then he went to the mission, but apparently he was back using the night before, is what the girlfriend says, before he went to the mission. So then, even the boy Wendell, that's like the third in charge now at the mission, he told me, he said, Miss Robbie, he said, Tim was having a hard time. He said, he even told me that he wished he was dead. And he said, but don't take that literally. He said, because we all feel that way when we're coming off of those drugs.
Yeah. Okay. Did Vaughn Blackwell, once again, did he know any of these guys? Casey, Rick, I'm guessing he knew Patrick, being that Patrick was at the mission for a while, but was he familiar with any of them before Tim disappeared, to your knowledge?
He was not, no.
Okay, so these are guys that I'm guessing maybe Tim never spoke about. Okay.
And I will tell you this about Rick Llewellyn. Rick was my ex-husband's friend. And before my ex-husband passed away, he lived with Rick. And that was, I think, how Tim knew him. And because whenever Tim came home from Pine Grove, I had took his phone from him, and I said, when you get this phone back, I said, I want you to go through it, and you are to delete anybody that's anything to do with drugs. And he said, Mom, I'll delete everybody but Rick. He said, because Rick was good to Dad, and I want to keep in touch with him.
Okay. Okay. Was Rick in a gang?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think he asked that earlier.
Okay, I know. I'm going to
older.
ask you that because I have in my notes, at least from when we talked before, it's very possible that he was in the same gang as Patrick was, the Simon City Royals.
He may be. I don't know. But if
Would that surprise you? Being that your ex-husband knew him, would that surprise you?
No.
Okay. All right. All right. We have to cover this, some of the technical side of this. Did Tim have a cell phone, and did it tell you anything? Were they able to track it down, ping it, anything like that?
Yes, he had turned his cell phone into Mr. Tuck, and Mr. Tuck has passed away now. He was like Mike Shirley and then Mr. Tuck, that he was the second in charge, there at the mission.
Okay.
And I had went when I picked Tim's things up, and I got Tim's phone. And when I got his phone, I did find messages in there, which he would have been en route, from the mission to Casey's house. And at that point, I've learned so much in the last year, almost a year and a half, to do with things. But the message to Casey from Tim was said, I'm on my way to your house. I need a 20 and a point was the exact words. And I know now, after talking to people, that means that he wanted $20 worth of drugs and a needle. So he was getting that from KC. So.
Okay, so you're gonna have to explain this. So are the police in possession of Tim's phone now?
I gave Tim's phone to the police, and they kept it for months and months. And then when I asked for it back, they just gave it back to me.
Okay. Then where was the phone was found at the mission?
Yes, but it was through Messenger, is where that message was from. So he would have, Patrick said that Tim was using his phone whenever he was driving him, to Casey's house.
Okay.
So he would have went through Patrick's phone to his Messenger and sent that message to Casey.
Okay, so let's maybe I have to break this down for the listeners a little bit. So the mission has Tim's phone. That's how you got the phone, and then that's how the police got the phone, and that's how you got it back. So we are to understand that when Rick picked Tim up at the church that day, September 3rd, then automatically Tim got on Patrick's phone and was using Messenger to contact Casey and whoever else.
Okay, so Rick didn't pick him up. Patrick picked him up from the church.
Right.
And then they're traveling to Casey's house. And while they're traveling, Tim's using Patrick's phone.
Okay,
and he sends Casey that message.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. And when you talked to Casey, did he ever own up to that message saying, yeah, I got some drugs and a needle for Tim?
No, but I told him I read the message.
But he never owned up to that.
No, and I was asking him questions about it because I don't know nothing about drugs. And I said, well, is that enough drugs that if Tim had it for him to overdose, would that have killed him? Would that have been enough for a person to overdose on? And he said, no, it shouldn't have been. So that was, I guess that's the closest to him and anything to giving it to him.
Okay. Would you say that was that the last message that Tim ever sent over any electronic communication? That one, or was that was it?
As far as we know, it is because it sent any more messages through Facebook or Messenger because through his phone, I had access to his Messenger and his Facebook, so I could check that kind of stuff.
Okay. So that message to Casey was the last message that can be proven that Tim was the, created it.
That's correct.
Okay, even though we know that Tim was seen after that. Okay. Now, if this hasn't got complex enough for the listeners, there's this very strange story then that popped up um, at some point regarding a guy whose name is Mike Madden, and it has to do with, of all things, Tim's birth certificate. Please explain how this guy got a hold of you and the story that he had and Tim's birth certificate you got back.
Okay. Well, Tim was thinking about going back truck driving right before he went back to the mission after he had come home from Pine Grove. Well, his driver's license, he had lost it. So he needed his birth certificate to get his license back with. So he had got his birth certificate from me. And I never got it back from him and never even thought about it again until, okay, this is how I even found out about the birth certificate. One Sunday, after Tim had been missing, me and probably about 30 of my friends and family, we went everywhere over around KC and Rick Llewellyn, all that area, handing out flyers and just going and knocking on doors and asking if people seen Tim. And we went by Rick Llewellyn's that day. And my husband and I were standing there talking to Rick. And he just walks out to those bushes by his house and says, he said, well, right here's where Tim's birth certificate was found. And I turned around and looked at him. I said, his birth certificate? And he said, yeah. I said, what was Tim's birth certificate doing laying out here in your yard? And he said, I don't know. He said, Tim was on his phone over here by these bushes for a long time. So maybe if he had it in his wallet, it fell out. And I thought,
well, how could Tim be on his phone if his phone was back at the mission?
He was on Rick's phone.
Rick's phone, okay.
Rick, yes, sir.
All right.
So I just immediately looked at him and I said, all I can tell you, Rick, is that's a red flag to me. And so anyway, nothing else came up about the birth certificate. I asked the investigator about it, and he said, yes, I have the birth certificate. He said, when I went over there to question Rick, he gave me the birth certificate. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I just don't understand about the birth certificate, but whatever. Well, I have had friend requests on Facebook from hundreds of people since this stuff has been going on with him. One day, I'm at work. I get a friend request from Michael Madden. And I will tell you, Edward, out of all the people I have ever had friend requests from, his face stood out to me. And I just looked down at it, and I don't know, call it instincts, whatever. Mm-hmm. I accepted his friend request. That evening, I get a message through Messenger from him saying that he is afraid for his family because of the missing man. And I'm like, what? I said, you are afraid for your family for what missing man? My son? And he said, yes. I said, why would you be afraid for your family because my son's missing? And he said, well, I want to meet with you. I don't want to talk about this over the phone or messaging. Well, anyway, I send him my phone number, and he calls me through Messenger. And he tells me another story about, another story, so we won't go there. But anyway, he tells me that he was at Rick Llewellyn's and that he found Tim's birth certificate, that a guy named Jared Slade came and picked him up, and he went to Rick's, and, we know what Rick does, so that's what he was there for. And while he got out of the car, he just happened to see the birth certificate laying there by the bushes. Well, it had rained during that time frame. There is nothing wrong with this birth certificate. So we don't know how the birth certificate got there, if Michael put it there, if Rick put it there, if Tim Tim couldn't have dropped it out of his wallet, and it sat there for over 2 weeks with the rain and not messed it up. So that's where that is with the birth certificate. It's still It's a piece of this puzzle that we know exists and we know happened, but we don't know the why and how of it.
It's very unusual. Birth certificate. I don't know if that a birth certificate's ever popped up in a disappearance that I've covered before, but that is a strange story. Maybe for the simple reason that people don't generally carry around their birth certificates with them, and you would think that if it did drop out of Tim's wallet, that he would have recognized that.
Mm-hmm.
Very. And where is the birth certificate now?
The investigator still has the birth certificate, even though one time when we were talking to him, he said, well, if you want Tim's birth certificate, you can have it back. I said, no, sir. I said, you keep that birth certificate. I said, because I'm not sure what the story is with that birth certificate.
Okay. And I have to ask this, Mike, this guy who contacted you, do you know if he is in a gang or not?
He is.
And what gang is he in?
The Simon City Royals.
So this would be the same gang that Patrick is in.
Yes, sir.
And it's not the same gang that Tim was affiliated with, the Latin Kings.
That's correct.
Okay. And I need to ask you this again in case anybody's forgotten. In your experience since this happened, September 3rd, 2017, has anybody that's popped up in this investigation or come to your house or called you anybody, have any of them been a Latin King?
None.
None.
I've not been contacted by anybody that's a Latin King.
Okay. Thank you. That's very interesting. It seems that Tim was around a bunch of guys who were in gangs that weren't his own, which I think is a big point in this particular disappearance. Now, you did say something there that Rick says that Tim was using Rick's phone. Has Rick ever told you who Tim was talking to?
Well, supposedly the girlfriend pulled Rick's phone records, and I had asked for those phone records, and I never got them. And then she deleted them out of her phone for some reason. But
Tim's girlfriend or Rick's girlfriend? Or whose girlfriend?
Tim's girlfriend.
Okay, and how did she get a hold of Rick's cell phone information?
He told her if she could come and help him get the records that he would let her pull them. And because I don't know who his phone service is with, but she went with him and they pulled the phone records or helped him pull the phone records. And she supposedly had screenshot them or had copies of them and was supposed to get them to me, but I never was given them. And she knows out of all this whole time, that's one time that I was angry at her because I was like, why have you saved everything else? But that seems like a very important piece of this puzzle and you got rid of it.
All right. So let's go through this again on September 3rd. September 3rd, Tim is at the church. Patrick shows up there. Patrick gives a ride to Tim over to KC's. From KC's, two other guys, one who has avoided you, took Tim over to Rick's. This is when Tim then used Rick's phone to call somebody, and this is also when Tim allegedly dropped his birth certificate in Rick's yard. Is that how September 3rd
Correct.
you believe went?
That's correct. That's what we put together.
Okay. Why can't Rick just tell you who Tim was talking to this day? I mean, if somebody were to borrow my phone and use it, I would think at some point I would look at my phone, at least at the number or something like that. Is there a reason that Rick just can't tell you, especially since he was such good friends with Tim's father, that he couldn't just say, yeah, Tim called so-and-so?
I don't know. That has puzzled me. That's been a big piece of a puzzle that I wanted to know. I wanted to know who Tim called from that phone.
Does Rick say that he just doesn't know?
He said he don't know. He said Tim went out there by the bushes and used his phone away from the house.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. That seems like a pretty weak explanation to me, but okay. All right. Now let's go back to it sounds just okay. Patrick, we'll go back to him for a little bit. Has his story ever changed about that day? And has he ever given you an explanation? Um, Ever given you an explanation as to what he thinks happened to Tim?
His story has never changed from that day as to where
Mm-hmm.
he, picked him up and took him to. Um, I did, me and my husband and my friend that helps me a lot, Missy and her husband, we all went and met Patrick one day at a restaurant. And he told me that he had heard that, something had happened to Tim. He didn't have a lot of details about it, but he was going to see what he could find out to help me find him. And I've contacted him several times, and he don't even message me back anymore. So he never did give me any information, as to whatever he had found out. And that day while we were there, I had never questioned him about this. And I said, okay, Patrick, I said, I just want you to know that over the months, I said, I have found out that Tim was in a game, that he was in the Latin Kings. I
Mm-hmm.
said, and I have found out that you are in the Simon City Royals. I said, so when you and Tim were at the mission together, did that cause any problems? And he said, Miss Robbie, he said, the very first day me and Tim ever met each other at the mission, he said, we immediately, I guess something to do with their tattoos, they knew that each one of them was from a different game. He
Mm-hmm.
said, and we just made a pact with each other that we were not going to let that interfere with what we were there to do. We were there to get better.
Yes. But there is a story. Is he saying that the last time that he ever saw Tim was when he dropped him off at Casey's?
That's what he sticks with, yes.
Okay. Because as you and I have talked about, there is a rumor out there that Patrick might have seen Tim some days later, and it had to do with an exchange of money. Anything to that, do you
That is,
think?
well, I don't know. Um, Monday after Tim was missing, not Monday, a week after Tim was missing, I got a phone call at work from a guy that I used to work with. And he said, Miss Robbie, he said, I don't get on Facebook. He said, and I did not know that Tim was missing. He said, but I am almost positive that I saw Tim at Corner Market, which is a grocery store. This would have been like, let's see, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. This would have been 6 days after Tim was missing. He said, I saw him at Corner Market standing out by a building. And he said, we even waved at each other. Okay. I even called Corner Market and tried to get them to pull the video and let me watch it. They would not. They said because of their customers' privacy. But the manager supposedly looked at the video and he told me he didn't see Tim on the video. I mean, this boy even told me exactly where he's seen him, every detail. Well, the story that we've been told is that Patrick came and got him about a week after he was missing. This would have been that time frame. And not a week, even a week, it would have been that Friday after Tim was missing. And that he picked him up, Tim spent the night with him, and that he gave Tim some money. We've been told two different amounts, $200 and $600. And that Tim spent the night with him, and then he brought Tim to Corner Market that Saturday. So that would have made Chad's story possibly true that he had seen Tim on Saturday. So
like 6 days later.
Right.
Wow.
Yes. And
Okay.
This story was told to the girlfriend and by a couple. And this girl actually went down to the investigator in Perry County and gave him this story. So I don't believe she would have just made that story up.
Maybe, maybe not. I've learned enough in disappearances to know that sometimes eyewitness sightings and people swearing that they saw things and talked to people necessarily isn't true. It's just the way it is.
Right.
I can't judge this one specifically. I just know there have been a lot of occasions where those types of sightings don't turn out to be anything. So I
Correct.
don't know what to think about that, but maybe there is an element of truth in there somewhere. I just don't know, but I thought that the listeners needed to hear that to decide that for themselves. Okay. Um, since you've know Patrick, you've gotten to talk to Casey, you've gotten to talk to Rick, you've gotten to talk to Mike. Would you say that these four guys, and maybe even some of those other guys that you've mentioned, are they friends? Are they in a gang together? Are they a group? Are they tight with each other? Have they known each other for a long time? How would you portray the relationship between those four guys?
As far as I know, none of them really knew each other. They all knew Tim, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that any of them knew each other. Patrick and Michael Madden might have known each other from, being in the same gang and having so
Mm-hmm.
many mutual friends. But Rick didn't know them, and Casey might have known them. So it might have Casey, Michael, and Patrick may, have known each other. But I would say Rick probably didn't know them. And he
Okay.
probably knew Michael from maybe Michael coming that day with that other boy to, but I
Okay.
don't think they were like, I don't think Rick, the older guy Rick, I don't think he's like friends hanging out with none of these people.
Let's move on to this. You've actually gotten to meet Richard Hedrick, who is the guy that started the mission. He's the guy whose money provides for it. You've actually gotten to meet him. He came to your house. What did he have to say about Tim's disappearance?
Um, Actually, I have not talked to Mr. Hedrick since Tim disappeared.
Oh, you haven't. So this is before Tim disappeared that you got to speak with him.
Yes.
Huh. I misunderstood that. I apologize. So have you tried to contact him in the last year and a half? Has he not put up any reward money? Has he not done anything helpful to help you, being that Tim disappeared from his mission?
Nothing that I know of. I've not spoken with him, since Tim disappeared.
Okay. But you have spoken with Vaughn, who is working with you now. I have to admit, I'm just going to speak out loud here, thinking out loud. That seems a little strange to me, Robbie. What do you think?
I don't know. I know that, Mr. Hedrick is a really good man. I've heard that he has been kind of sick. So,
Hmm.
I know that he cared about Tim. I know that he did. And I know that he's probably just really busy, I'm sure.
Okay. All right. And being that Vaughn Blackwell does not work at the mission, he's been working with you. What has he been doing with you for you since this all happened?
Oh my goodness. Mr. Vaughn and Miss Dee have been a blessing throughout all of this.
Mm-hmm.
They have helped me on searches. They have made brochures. They've done footwork, just going all over the place to different people and talking to different people with me at all hours of the night. Me and my husband and them have went and met people if we got a, lead in. So they have been just a godsend through this.
Okay. If you can say, I'm not asking you to pierce any confidentiality between the two of you, the three of you, or anything, but do they have any idea of what could have happened to Tim, being that they knew him?
Um, no, they really are at a loss, just like I am with this. We just wish that we could have found him that day,
Mm-hmm.
that September the 3rd.
Sure.
We feel like that was such a crucial day that if Mr. Vaughn, Misty, myself, and my husband, if we could have found him that day, if we had not been lied to by people telling us that they hadn't seen him, you know, maybe we wouldn't be right where we're at today.
And maybe you need to remind the listeners, who are these people who lied to you about this?
Patrick Walker, Casey Caranja Cabert, and Rick Llewellyn.
So they lied to you at first, but then they owed up to it later.
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting. You had mentioned very early in this conversation, and I wanted to move it back to this point. You had mentioned an envelope that Tim had sent to himself from himself. Let's talk about that envelope now. This was when he was in jail, correct?
Correct. That's when he was in Parchman prison.
Okay. And did you ever get to see the contents of that envelope? How big was the envelope? I mean, was there pages in it? Was there money in it? Was it thin? Was it thick? What was it? What happened to it?
It was a legal size envelope, and it didn't feel real thick. It felt like maybe it had just a page in it, maybe like a letter. I don't know, but it wasn't real thick or anything like that. And I never looked for it or anything. Maybe it's one of those things that I didn't want to know.
Okay, so he was in jail and he mailed it to you?
He mailed it it came to my house, but it was addressed to him.
Okay. And you set it aside for when he got out of jail?
That's right. We just went and put it in his room on his dresser, and it sat there until he came home.
And you never saw it again?
No, sir. And I don't even remember much about it. And I never even thought about it again until all this kind of stuff started happening, And then I thought, well, is this all connected? And it may have nothing to do with any of that. I don't know.
Okay.
I just think I go back to being angry at the fact whenever a young person, any person, ends up going to jail or prison for doing wrong, and they have to have protection while they're being punished. That's not okay.
No. Right. Has Tim's girlfriend, once again, we're not naming her, ever offered an opinion of what that envelope could have been?
That was way before she was in the picture, so I don't even know if I've ever even told her about it.
Okay, she
I've
might
not told a lot of people about this, but now I guess lots of people are going to know about it.
Okay, so we just don't know. You never saw the envelope again, and it was never even a topic of conversation between you and Tim again?
Never.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to do just a few more things that I want to ask you. I might have asked you this before, but I just want to be clear on them. Are you sure that Tim was actually a member of the Latin Kings?
Tim never personally told me he was a Latin king, but I have been told by many people throughout this year that he was.
Okay, but once again, none of them have ever contacted you, nothing like that. You could not even name one other person that he knew that was in the same gang?
That's correct.
All right, all you could do was name people in other gangs like Patrick, Mike, etc.
Right, because I didn't know anything about these gang stuff until Tim came up missing.
Right.
My knowledge has grown in that because of my son's disappearance.
Of course. Have the police ever expressed to you, if you can say, any idea about the gang angle in this, with Tim allegedly being in one gang and these other guys being in others?
They have not. I don't know that I've ever even discussed the gang stuff with them. I think I may have mentioned one time to the investigator that from what the research that I've done, that pretty much everybody that's been mentioned mostly are Simon City Royals.
Yeah, that's right. And you're sure that Tim was not a Simon City Royal?
If he was, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. And given that there has been, we've talked more about gangs in this disappearance than probably any other case that I've done maybe going back to 2017, because there was a disappearance I covered back then that had to do with a biker gang. Have you or anybody in your family ever been threatened for the lengths that you've gone to try to figure out what happened to Tim?
We have not.
Okay. Okay. I know it's been a year and a half, and I know just was it last night or this morning? All this time runs together. But you had sent me some screenshots of some messages that Tim had sent you not too long before he disappeared. How do you look back at that time now? I know that you must have been going back through your phone or your computer to find them.
Yes, sir. Last night when I was going through trying to get some, dates down so I would have as close to accurate dates for you as possible,
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at some things that Tim had sent me right before he became missing. So probably about 2 weeks before he had come up missing, he had sent me this picture of a roadway going up into heaven.
Yeah.
And he said, that's where I want to be. And I sent him back a message and I said, you are not to go to heaven before me. And and then he had sent me some pictures of our family before
Yeah.
my divorce and everything, of me and him and his dad and his brother. And he said, I sure do miss those days. And then I sent you the screenshot of mine and his messages the night before he left, when I had told him that he needed to go and he needed to stay the whole 6 months, and then he needed to, live on the 3rd floor and do the work program until he could get enough money to get out on his own. And then he had sent me back the message of, why are we discussing where I'm going to be? I could be dead in 6 months. And at that time, I was just like a little angry with him, because 2 messages up, he had told me he loved me, and I said, I love you too. And then we go to that, and then I go to good night, Tim. And it's like, pretty much the last words I said to my son was, good night, Tim.
So what you're saying is the night before he disappeared, he had said something to the effect that he could be gone in 6 months.
Yes.
Wow. And then he also, in another message, expressed this desire to be somewhere else. And I've seen the picture, and this highway that looks, it's an optical illusion that makes it look like it's going up into the clouds, but actually, technically, that's a highway that looks like that in the western United States. But that's where he saw that picture, and it kind of made him wish to be somewhere else.
Right. He was just going through a really, low time, and that's what happens whenever people are on drugs. It just destroys them. It takes them away from everything good. I mean, I was last night when I was like going through and making notes about some of the things that I wanted to make sure I touched on. I was like, drugs took him away from lifelong friends, that still right now I get messages from, through this, that were through school with Tim and college and friends after college. All of those, he had lots of friends, and, his choices had took him away from all of those friends that loved him and he loved. And it's a horrible, horrible, evil thing to do with drugs.
Yeah. And it's something that you could have probably never imagined happening to Tim, given his younger days.
Right. I've had his friends, several of them, tell me, Miss Robbie, I could see me talking about themselves going down those roads, but not Tim. It just was not something that anybody would have ever thought that addiction would have took over Tim's life.
Yeah.
And then it led to probably something horrible happening to him.
Right, and we still don't know, and the listeners have to keep in mind this is a disappearance from 2017. In my world of doing Unfound, Tim's case is very, very new. The average age of a case I covered on Unfound is like 20 years old. This is a very new case. And the truth is, and of course we're hoping for this, that Tim could still be out there, alive.
A-
We just don't know.
Absolutely.
And I have to be honest, if this case was 20 years old, then I wouldn't quite probably be as hopeful. I'm just going to be honest with you, on the record with
Yes,
that.
sir.
But it's been not quite a year and a half, and I know it's been a living hell for you, as it is for any parent. Something that
And,
you were never prepared for.
and it's something that a parent should never have to go through. No one should ever have to go through this, something
Yeah,
like this.
right. Yeah. You said that Tim's father passed away before this happened. He passed away some years
Yes,
ago.
sir. He did.
Okay. Okay. And once again, you have another son who is experiencing what you are as well. Um, is there any place that online that people can go? Do you have a Facebook page, website, anything like that, Robbie?
We do. We have a Facebook page my cousin helped me set up for Tim. It's called Against All Odds, looking for Tim Boshart.
Okay.
Actually, I don't know. I think the baseball was on there. When Tim was in the mission the first 6 months when he had done really good, the man Wendell, that's like the third in charge there now. I guess the baseball had come out of cereal. I don't know, but anyway, I think it's got frosted flakes on it. But anyway, Tim had jokingly, when they were all sitting around one night, he said, "Well, one day I'm going to write a book." He said, "And you'll have my first autograph, Wendell." And he had wrote "Against All Odds" and wrote his, signed his signature on there, Tim Boshart, and he'd give it to Wendell. So when Tim came up missing, Wendell gave it to me. So
Interesting. So please say the name of that Facebook page again so people can remember it.
okay, it's Against All Odds, looking for Tim Boshart.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else that you'd like to say, Robbie, before we complete this interview?
I just want to thank you for what you do and for your help with getting Tim's information out there. And I just want to say I've been very blessed through this nightmare. I have lots of family and friends who have helped me so much. And I always say, God's will and God's perfect timing, and I know in His timing I will find my son.
Okay, Robbie. I appreciate the kind words, and I want you to know that no matter what happens with Tim's case, whether it is he's found tomorrow, 10 years from now, we just don't know. But I want you to know that I'm always going to be here for you, and we're going to know each other for a long time.
Absolutely. Thank you for your friendship.
You're welcome, Robbie, and I thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that was my interview with Robbie Bouchard Fairley, mother of Tim Boshart. I thank her for bringing her son's case to Unfound. Between the time I did the interview and the recording of this summation, I had a chance to look into who Tim actually called with Rick's phone on the day Tim disappeared. I was very fortunate to find out at least a couple of the numbers. At least one call was to Tim's credit card company. I'm not sure we can make anything of that unless something suspicious went on with his account after he disappeared. And the credit card company will surely never discuss the nature of Tim's call. But the other call was to a PJ Hollingsworth. Robbie told me that he was a friend of Tim's, and that he might even be a Latin king. But PJ denies ever talking to Tim that day. But he also went to rehab right after Tim disappeared. Not sure what to make of it. Hey, at least he might be in Tim's gang, right? On that topic, the gang angle must be considered in this case. Yes, I'm sure many people will suspect that Tim accidentally overdosed and others covered it up. That is a suspicion in many of Unfound's cases where an addict disappears. Some of our cases where that could have happened: Lola Catherine Fry, Amanda DeGuio, Crystal Morrison, Billy DiSilvestro. And I could be convinced these cases were accidents. But with Tim's disappearance,
He was surrounded by guys who, although they might have been friendly, gang allegiances come first, not friendly conversations. You can look it up yourself, but these gangs mentioned in the interview are not friendly with each other. So although Tim might have had the attitude that, hey, these are just friendly guys, some of them might have thought differently. They might have thought they could get ahead in their own gang if they offed a member of another, whether by violence or non-accidental overdose. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.